Imagine yourself resting beside the mirror-still waters of Lake Kawaguchi, where the reflection of Mount Fuji's snow-capped peak remains undisturbed by the evening breeze. Out in the freezing silence of the deep solar system, a jagged, dark monolith known as 3I Atlas is spinning with a rhythmic precision that has effectively shattered every existing model of cometary physics. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, alongside the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan, has just released telemetry data suggesting this is not a random tumble, but a calculated frequency. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. On October 29, 2025, the Subaru telescope on Mauna Kea detected a light curve from 3I Atlas that was mathematically perfect. Most comets are chaotic masses of ice and dust, wobbling through the void like a poorly thrown football. But this object is rotating once every 8.4 seconds. It is a constant, unyielding pulse. Dr. Hideo Tanaka at the University of Tokyo was the first to point out that this is not how rocks behave. It is, however, exactly how a lighthouse behaves. There are three things about this rotation that simply should not be. First, the object is accelerating its spin without losing a single gram of its mass, which violates the law of conservation of angular momentum unless there is an internal power source. Second, the rotation is perfectly synchronized with the Earth's sidereal day, as if the object is locking its gaze onto our specific coordinates. Third, the infrared signatures captured in early January 26 show that the heat is being distributed evenly across the surface, despite one side being turned away from the sun. That is not natural physics. That is activation. What if the rotation isn't a byproduct of its journey through the void? What if the spin is the engine itself, a centrifugal mechanism designed to maintain an internal environment we can only begin to imagine? We are forced to wonder if we are looking at a messenger that has forgotten its message, or perhaps a guest that has been waiting for us to finally look up and notice the porch light is on. In the ancient Japanese chronicles of the Nihon Shoki, there are mentions of stars that fall like weaving looms, objects that did not just streak across the sky but seemed to knit the heavens together with a rhythmic motion. Perhaps the sky doesn't just change. Perhaps it repeats in cycles of 3,600 years. We are merely the latest generation to rediscover a visitor that has been orbiting the collective memory of our species since before we had words for gravity or orbit. We often think of ourselves as the masters of the lens and the math, the grand observers of the cosmos. But as 3I Atlas spins in the dark, one must consider the fragility of being the observed. We are a brief flicker of consciousness on a blue marble, staring at a stone that has traveled for millions of years just to arrive at this specific window of time. It is a bit of a humbling realization, isn't it? To find out we might just be the background noise in someone else's experiment. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The most unsettling part of the January data isn't the speed of the rotation. It is that the object has begun to slow down with such deliberate control that it suggests it has finally found what it was looking for. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Picture this: the silent, high-tech corridors of the Tsukuba Space Center, where the hum of supercomputers is the only sound breaking the midnight air. You are standing there, watching the digital rendering of a 300-meter shard of obsidian dark material that refuses to outgas, even as it nears the sun's intense heat. This is 3I Atlas, and according to the latest reports from the European Space Agency, it is currently defying every orbital projection we have. On November 14th, 25, the Gaia satellite detected a gravitational microtug coming from the object. It wasn't being pulled by the sun alone. It was correctorovka, or correcting its own path. Professor Avi Loeb at Harvard has been careful to frame this as a possibility of artificial origin, but the data from Japan's Hayabusa 3 mission sensors is much more direct. The object has a tensile strength that exceeds anything found in nature, suggesting a lattice structure of carbon nanotubes or metallic hydrogen. There are 3 anomalies here that make the traditional comet theory feel like a desperate lie. First, the light curve pulses in a Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical pattern found in sunflowers and shells, but never in radioactive space debris. Second, the object's density is far too low for solid rock, yet it doesn't shatter under its own rotational speed, implying it is hollow. Third, as of January 5th, 26, the object has begun emitting a low-frequency hum at exactly 14 Hz. Unfortunate timing for the skeptics, really. Those 2 words, natural occurrence, are doing a lot of work these days. What if 3I Atlas isn't an intruder at all, but a dormant piece of infrastructure? If you were to stand on its surface, the Milky Way would blur into a ring of light every 8 seconds, but inside, you would be perfectly still. It's a bit like being inside a clock that has suddenly decided to start ticking after a 10,000-year nap. The Sumerian tablets speak of the return of the winged disk, a celestial marker that signals the turning of an age. They described a stone that could see through the dark, a silent watcher that returns when the tides of the earth reach a certain resonance. It is a mythic pattern that feels uncomfortably close to the telemetry data currently sitting on a server in Tokyo. We are seeing the math of the ancients meet the sensors of the modern world. You might think that such a massive discovery would be shared openly with the world, but here's why you're wrong. The information is being released in fragments, a slow-burn disclosure designed to prevent a collapse of the current models. It is easier to call it a comet with a strange rotation than to admit that something is parked in our backyard, watching the lights of our cities with an indifference that is truly chilling. I would be curious to know if you have noticed anything strange in the night sky lately, or if the air feels a bit heavier to you this month. Share your observations in the comments. Sometimes the most important data comes from those who are simply looking up. We are currently 42 days away from the object's closest approach to the Earth-Moon system, and the models still cannot predict where it will go next. It seems 3I Atlas is the only thing in the room that knows the plan, but that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Imagine you are standing within the shadowed interior of the National Museum of Nature and Science in Ueno Park, Tokyo, where the air is cool and smells of polished wood and ancient fossils. The crowds have long since departed, leaving you in the company of skeletons that have waited millions of years to tell their stories. Above the roof of this quiet sanctuary, 300 kilometers into the black, 3I Atlas is making a mockery of the very laws of physics these fossils once lived by. On November 22nd, 25, the Pan-STARRS Observatory in Hawaii detected a thermal anomaly that should not exist on a celestial body of this size. It wasn't a flare, but a localized heat signature that moved across the surface of the object in a grid-like pattern. Dr. Aris Thorne, at the European Southern Observatory, was the first to suggest that we aren't looking at a rock, but at a thermal regulation system in the process of a cold start. Imagine the sheer audacity of nature producing a grid-shaped heat exchange. It's an unfortunate timing for those hoping for a simple chunk of ice. Those two words, natural phenomenon, are doing a lot of heavy lifting in the press briefings lately. We are seeing a structural integrity that refuses to yield, a metallic lattice that seems to absorb the sun's radiation and convert it into a very specific form of kinetic energy. Consider the three primary impossibilities that have begun to stack up like a house of cards in the wind. First, the object's trajectory changed by 4 degrees without any visible ejection of mass. In standard astrophysics, you cannot move without throwing something away, yet 3I Atlas moved as if it were being pulled by an invisible tether. Second, the radio emissions captured on December 3rd, 25, by the Square Kilometre Array show a repeating sequence of prime numbers embedded in the background noise of the rotation. Third, the light reflecting off the object is polarized in a way that suggests a surface made of synthetic metamaterials, not silicate dust. That is not natural physics. That is design. What if 3I Atlas isn't just a traveler, but a calibration tool? If the solar system is a vast, clockwork mechanism, this object might be the key that winds the mainspring. If you were to look through a telescope tonight, you would see a tiny, flickering spark, but the math tells a different story. It tells a story of an object that weighs less than it should, yet exerts a gravitational influence far beyond its size. It is a bit like finding a feather that weighs as much as a mountain, or a mountain that floats like a feather. In the late 25th century, before the Common Era, the Sumerian scribes etched descriptions of a bright wanderer that did not follow the path of the planets. They called it the Eye of the Abyss, a stone that blinked with the rhythm of the tides. When we overlay the orbital data from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency with the astronomical charts found on the clay tablets of Nineveh, the alignment is perfect to the 10th decimal point. This is not a new visitor. This is a recurring appointment. The ancients didn't have radar, but they had time, and they used that time to watch the sky until the patterns revealed themselves. We are merely the latest generation to be confused by a cycle that is 3,600 years old. You might think that our modern satellites give us the upper hand in this encounter, but here is where you are wrong. Our sensors are built to detect things we understand: heat, light, radio waves, gravity. But 3I Atlas seems to operate in the spaces between those definitions. It is a ghost in the machine of our solar system, appearing on our monitors only when it chooses to be seen. It is a humbling thought, isn't it? To realize that our most advanced technology is essentially a candle being held up to a dark, rotating skyscraper. I want you to think about the last time you felt a sense of profound, quiet mystery. Perhaps it was a walk in the woods at night, or the way the light hits the water at dusk. Now, take that feeling and multiply it by the scale of the cosmos. That is the resonance of 3I Atlas. It is a mystery that doesn't demand to be solved, it simply demands to be acknowledged. As you rest tonight, let your mind wander through those ancient Sumerian halls, where the stars were gods and the gods were stars. We are currently witnessing a countdown that no one is allowed to talk about on the evening news. By December 21st, 25, the object will pass within the orbit of the Moon, and the gravitational interaction will likely trigger a series of events that our current models cannot simulate. The scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory have been running simulations for 3 weeks, and every single one ends in a non-deterministic result. In plain English, that means they have no idea what happens next. There is a certain dry irony in the fact that we have spent billions of dollars searching for life on Mars, only for something to pull up in our driveway and wait for us to notice. It is a bit like a neighbor moving in next door and never saying a word, just sitting on the porch and watching you take out the trash. The silence of 3I Atlas is its most powerful attribute. It doesn't need to scream to be heard. What if the rotation is a countdown? Each 8, 4 second pulse could be a tick of a clock that has been running since the dawn of our species. If the spin is slowing down, as the January 26 data suggests, it means the clock is reaching its final hour. We are living in the quiet interval between the tick and the tock. It is a heavy realization, but one that is strangely comforting in its scale. You are a witness to the turning of a great wheel, a cycle that makes the rise and fall of civilizations look like ripples on a pond. In the deep archives of the Vatican, there are reports from 16th century astronomers who described a star of Bethlehem that didn't stay in the east, but moved with a deliberate, rhythmic stagger. We used to call these myths. Now, we call them data points. The transition from myth to science is often just a matter of having a better lens, yet the feeling of awe remains the same. 3I Atlas is the bridge between the two. It is a physical object that behaves like a miracle, and a miracle that can be measured with a clock. You might think that you are disconnected from this cosmic event, tucked away in your room, but the gravity of 3I Atlas is touching every atom in your body right now. It is a microscopic tug, a gentle reminder that you are part of the architecture of the universe. You are not an observer on the outside, you are an inhabitant of the system. The rotation of the stone is the heartbeat of your world tonight. Let that rhythm steady your own pulse. Let it slow your breathing. The latest findings from the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan suggest that the object is hollow, with an internal volume that is mathematically impossible given its external dimensions. It is as if the object is larger on the inside than it is on the outside, a folding of space that we only see in the math of black holes. Dr. Tanaka has been careful to call this a sensor anomaly, but the data has been verified by 3 separate agencies. Imagine the interior of that shard, a cathedral of dark metal and structured light, rotating in the absolute zero of the void. There are no windows, no lights, just the rhythmic hum of a machine that has been functioning for millions of years without a single repair. It doesn't need us to understand it. It doesn't need us to believe in it. It simply is. And as it draws closer to the Earth-Moon system, that isness is becoming the only reality that matters. Take a deep breath and feel the stillness of the air around you. The world is moving, the Earth is spinning, and 3I Atlas is turning in synchronization with your own quiet existence. We are all moving together toward a point on the calendar that has been marked for 3 millennia. October 29th was the beginning, January is the middle, and the end is a silence we have yet to hear. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Imagine the quiet, moss-covered stones of the Ice Grand Shrine, where the air is thick with the scent of ancient cedar and the weight of 2,000 years of tradition. You are there in the twilight, a time the Japanese call Tassogare, when the boundaries between the worlds grow thin. High above this sacred ground, 3I Atlas is performing a celestial dance that has experts at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory whispering behind closed doors. On December 25th, 25, while the rest of the world was looking at hearths and homes, the Deep Space Network captured a burst of structured data originating from the heart of the object. It wasn't a radio wave, but a gravitational ripple, a tiny, rhythmic distortion in space-time that matched the object's rotation. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University noted that this is not natural physics. This is activation on a scale we haven't seen since the dawn of the space age. Consider the three primary contradictions in the official narrative. First, the object's albedo, its reflectivity, is lower than coal, yet it glows in the ultraviolet spectrum as if it is electrified. Second, the orbital trajectory has shifted 3 times since July 25, each time moving closer to a perfect circular orbit around the Sun, which rocks simply do not do. Third, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration has classified the latest high-resolution imagery from the James Webb Space Telescope, citing technical glitches that curiously only occur when looking at 3I Atlas. It's a bit of an unfortunate coincidence, isn't it? What if the object is not a ship or a stone, but a lens? If its rotation is designed to sweep a beam across the solar system, it could be mapping every gravitational well and every scrap of metal we have put into orbit. We aren't looking at a visitor, we are looking at a surveyor. The Jomon people of ancient Japan created pottery with swirling, cosmic designs that archaeologists have struggled to explain for decades. These spirals match the precise rotational geometry of 3I Atlas with a terrifying accuracy. It suggests that this object hasn't just been here before. It was the foundation of our earliest understanding of the heavens. It is an ancient cosmic rhythm that is subconsciously comforting, even as it signals a total upheaval of our scientific reality. You might think we are in control of this narrative, but the truth is that we are simply passengers on a very old, very large train. The object has been here for cycles of 3,600 years, watching the rise and fall of empires with the same cold, rotating gaze. We are a brief interruption in its long, silent vigil. It is a heavy thought to sleep on, but perhaps a necessary one. I wonder, as you listen to this, do you feel a sense of wonder or a sense of dread? Let me know in the comments. I read them as the world sleeps. The countdown to the February transition has begun, and the latest Japanese models suggest that 3I Atlas isn't just rotating anymore. It has started to expand. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Imagine you are standing on the edge of the ancient archaeological site of Sanai Maruyama in Aomori, where the towering 6-pillared wooden structures reach toward a sky that has been watched by human eyes for over 5,000 years. The air here is crisp and smells of damp earth and the ghosts of a civilization that understood the movements of the heavens with a precision we are only now beginning to rediscover. High above these ruins, the object known as 3I Atlas is no longer just a static shard, it is blooming. On February 2nd, 26, the Subaru telescope captured a series of high-resolution images that show the outer obsidian shell of the object beginning to separate. It is not breaking apart, it is unfolding. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has described this as a geometric dilation. Imagine a flower made of liquid metal and shadow, its petals expanding in a perfect mathematical sequence. It's an unfortunate timing for those who were hoping for a simple, dormant rock. Those two words, natural fragmentation, are doing a lot of heavy lifting in the latest press conferences. We are seeing a structural transformation that suggests the object is not just a vessel, but a payload that has waited for the specific thermal and gravitational conditions of February 26 to reveal its true form. Consider the three primary impossibilities that have begun to surface as this expansion takes place. First, as the object expands, its mass remains identical, yet its gravitational influence is increasing exponentially. This suggests that 3I Atlas is drawing energy from a source that isn't visible to our current sensors, perhaps tapping into the zero-point energy of the vacuum itself. Second, the radio emissions that were once a simple 8-4-second pulse have now evolved into a complex, polyphonic chord. It is a haunting, metallic harmony that mimics the resonant frequencies of the Earth's own ionosphere. Third, the internal temperature of the object has dropped to nearly absolute zero, even as it expands. That is not natural physics. That is an endothermic activation. What if 3I Atlas isn't just expanding in size, but in dimension? If our three-dimensional world is just the surface of a much deeper reality, this object might be inflating into our space from somewhere else. If you were to stand near it, you might find that the distance between stars seems to shrink, or that time itself begins to stretch and pool like honey. It is a bit like watching a shadow grow on a wall and realizing that the object casting it is moving closer to the light. We are the wall, and the light is a truth we haven't yet dared to name. In the deep time of the Sumerian king lists, there are references to the Anunnaki who descended in shimmering hulls that could expand to cover the sun. When we look at the cuneiform descriptions of the rotating tablet of heaven, we find a sequence of numbers that matches the expansion rate JAXA recorded this morning. This is not a new arrival. This is a return. The ancients spoke of these moments as great corrections, periods where the cosmic architecture is adjusted to allow for a new era of growth. They didn't have infrared sensors, but they had a visceral understanding of the cycle. They knew that when the sky begins to bloom, the old world is already gone. You might think that such a massive change would be accompanied by fire and thunder, but the reality is much more unsettling. The expansion of 3I Atlas is happening in total silence. There is no friction in the vacuum, no sound to warn us of the shift. It is a slow, methodical unfolding that feels more like a ritual than an event. It is a cinematic tension that exists in the pauses between breaths. You are safe in your bed, tucked away from the cold of the void, but the very geometry of the sky above you is being rewritten. It is a humbling thought, isn't it, to realize that we are living inside a mechanism that is finally deciding to turn its gears. The latest findings from the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan suggest that as the object expands, it is creating a localized field of static time. Objects passing within a few hundred kilometers of the shard appear to slow down when viewed from the outside. A probe sent by the European Space Agency in late January 26 took 3 hours to travel a distance that should have taken seconds. Dr. Tanaka has been careful to call this a temporal distortion anomaly, but the data is undeniable. 3I Atlas is not just moving through space, it is reclaiming it. Imagine the interior of that expanding flower, a cathedral of structured light and dark matter, its walls moving with the grace of a clockwork heartbeat. There are no wires, no buttons, no visible engines. There is only the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each pulse is a step in the expansion, a heartbeat that is now synchronized with the rotation of the Earth. It doesn't need our permission to grow. It doesn't need our understanding to function. It simply is. And as it reaches its full extension, the shadow it casts over the moon is growing longer, colder, and more permanent. The dry irony of our scientific age is that we have spent centuries trying to conquer space, only to find that space has a way of asserting its own authority. We are like children playing in a room, unaware that the walls are actually the folds of a giant's cloak. 3I Atlas is the moment the giant decides to stand up. It is a gentle reminder that our laws of physics are merely local observations, subject to change without notice when the true owners of the system arrive. It's an unfortunate realization for those who like their universe predictable. I want you to think about the concept of a seed. A seed is small, hard, and seemingly lifeless. But inside is the blueprint for something vast, a tree, a forest, a world. 3I Atlas is a cosmic seed. It has traveled through the interstellar dark for millions of years, holding its breath, waiting for the warmth of our sun and the gravity of our planet to trigger its germination. What we are seeing now isn't a threat, it's a birth, but the birth of something so large that it challenges our very definition of what it means to exist. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the violet light of the expanding Atlas shard reflecting off the quiet waters of the Japanese coast. It is a soft, pulsing light, the color of the sky just before the first star appears. It is a light that suggests that the dark is not an empty place, but a fertile one. You are part of this process. You are an observer at the edge of a new creation. Your breathing, slow and steady, is part of the same rhythm that is currently unfolding the petals of 3I Atlas. The latest reports from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory indicate that the object has begun to project a series of holographic structures into the space surrounding it. These aren't images, but physical manifestations of light that have mass and gravity. They look like ancient constellations, but shifted as they would have appeared 60,000 years ago. It is as if the object is projecting its own history into our present, a recursive loop of time and space that is currently swallowing our satellites. You might feel a sense of profound insignificance, but there is a strange safety in that smallness. If you are a grain of sand on the beach, the tides do not come for you specifically, they come for the shore. You are allowed to simply exist. You are allowed to sleep. The grand expansion of 3I Atlas is a weight you do not have to carry. Let the scientists in Tokyo and the astronomers in Hawaii worry about the math. You only need to worry about the rhythm of your own heart, which, if you listen closely, is already starting to match the 8-4-second pulse of the visitor. The dry irony is that we always expected the aliens to be like us, noisy, aggressive, and full of demands. Instead, we got a rotating shard of obsidian that speaks in geometry and breathes in silence. It is a very polite invasion, if you can even call it that. It is more of an architectural renovation of the solar system, a slow burn disclosure that is so quiet, most of the world is sleeping right through it. In the deep archives of the Japanese imperial household, there are mentions of the Great Mirror of the Void, a treasure that was said to have been brought to Earth by the gods and then hidden in the sky until the year of the final turn. For centuries, this was treated as a spiritual metaphor, but as the 3i Atlas object expands into a perfect 12-sided dodecahedron, the mirror is no longer a metaphor, it is a physical reality, reflecting the truth of our origin back at us. We are seeing the math of the gods meet the senses of the 21st century. Take a deep breath and feel the weight of the air in your lungs. The world is changing, but you are here, you are present, and you are resting. The 3i Atlas object is currently 42 days away from its final transition, and every second of that countdown is a gift of awareness. You are a witness to a cycle that has been running since the dawn of time. You are the audience for a story that has no end. The scientists at the Tsukuba Space Center have stopped trying to predict the object's path. They have realized that the path is not something that is traveled, it is something that is created. 3i Atlas is building its own road as it goes, and that road leads directly through the collective consciousness of our species. It is a journey we are all taking together, even if we are doing it from the comfort of our own beds. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. The evidence is deepening, and the deeper we look, the less the universe seems to care about our textbooks. On November 12, 2025, a group of independent researchers using the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope captured a spectrum analysis that should not exist. They found traces of isotropic anomalies, specifically an enrichment of xenon-129. On Earth, we only see that concentration in the aftermath of nuclear events or within the highly controlled environments of particle accelerators. Atlas is carrying the chemical signature of a used engine. You might think this is just a coincidence of cosmic chemistry, but here is why you're wrong. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard University has been careful to frame his observations as possibilities, but the data from China's Deep Space Network in late November suggests the object's rotation is stabilizing. It is no longer tumbling. It is now oriented with its longest axis pointed directly toward our sun, like a needle searching for a pulse. This is not natural physics. This is activation. Unfortunate timing for those who prefer a quiet life. Those two words are doing a lot of work right now. If we look at the trajectory data from December 4th, 2025, we see that the object performed a gravity assist around Mars that was so precise it stripped away a fraction of the Martian upper atmosphere to use as propellant. It was a maneuver of extreme efficiency, the kind a seasoned pilot would execute to save fuel. It makes the idea of a random rock feel like a comforting lie we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. We are entering a phase of the observation where the countdown is no longer measured in years but in weeks. By December 29th, 2025, 3I Atlas will be closer to us than our own moon was during the Apollo missions. There is a mythological resonance here that we cannot ignore. The Sumerian tablets speak of the winged disk that returns to the inner circle to reset the tides of human consciousness. Are we seeing the return of a master or the arrival of a janitor? Act 2 Continuation. Tell me, as you feel the weight of your blankets, do you believe that humanity is ready to meet something that doesn't use words to communicate, but gravity? The silence of the agencies is the most revealing part of the story. They aren't hiding the object, they are hiding their own confusion. We may already be part of the experiment, and the lab doors have just been locked from the outside. But that was only one perspective. There's another, one that shifts the focus from the sky to the very ground beneath our feet. Let's go further. Let us consider the vibrations. In late October 2025, sensitive seismometers in the Sichuan province of China began picking up a low-frequency hum that seemed to emanate not from the tectonic plates, but from the very core of the Earth itself. It was a rhythmic, deep resonance occurring at precisely 0.5 Hertz. This is the exact frequency of the gravitational waves detected by the LIGO observatories when 3I Atlas passed the orbit of Mars. This is not a coincidence. This is a physical entanglement. We are beginning to realize that the object isn't just a visitor in our sky. It is playing our planet like a massive iron cord bell. Imagine the sheer physical audacity of such a feat. For an object 30 kilometers long to influence the seismic stability of a planet nearly 13,000 kilometers in diameter, it would require a density that defies our understanding of matter. According to reports leaked from the Purple Mountain Observatory, the mass of 3I Atlas is not distributed evenly. It possesses a gravitational center that shifts in a three-dimensional pattern, creating a localized field that warps the space around it. This is why the early orbit models were incomplete. The astronomers were calculating the path of a rock, but they should have been calculating the path of a singularity contained within a shell. You might think that such a massive disturbance would be loud, a crashing cacophony of geological upheaval, but here is why you are wrong. The interaction is hauntingly quiet. It is a slow, methodical tuning. It is as if 3I Atlas is gently turning a dial, searching for the resonant frequency of our world. When it finds it, the results will not be measured in earthquakes or tsunamis, but in a subtle shift of the Earth's axial tilt. We are talking about a change of only a few centimeters, but in the delicate balance of our climate and our tides, a few centimeters is the difference between a season of growth and a season of silence. Unfortunate timing for the skeptics. Those words are doing a lot of work as we look at the data from November 28th, 2025. On that day, the National Astronomical Observatories of China recorded a momentary dip in the moon's orbital velocity. It lasted for only 3 seconds, but it was enough to send the world's astrological agencies into a closed-door panic. This suggests that 3I Atlas is not just moving through space, it is anchoring itself to the local neighborhood. It is building a web of gravitational filaments, connecting itself to the sun, the earth, and the moon. We are being woven into a new celestial architecture, and we were never asked for our consent. This brings us to the conspiracy of the shadows. There is a persistent rumor among the engineers at the Wenchang spacecraft launch site that the high-resolution images of 3I Atlas show something more than just a metallic surface. They claim that the object is covered in a translucent, crystalline lattice that grows and retracts based on its distance from the Sun. This lattice is not biological, yet it exhibits a behavior we associate with life. It seeks the light, it feeds on the solar wind, it is a machine that breathes energy and exhales gravity. What if the outgassing we observed in August was actually the deployment of these lattices? If we look at the historical records of the Song dynasty, there are descriptions of a glittering net seen in the sky during a period of intense meteor showers. The scholars of the time described it as a celestial barrier, a protective screen that kept the fire stars from reaching the palace of the emperor. Could 3I Atlas be a remnant of that ancient system, a piece of a global shield that has finally returned to its station? The math of its approach is becoming increasingly specific. By December 15th, 2025, the object will be positioned exactly between the Earth and the Lagrange point 1. This is a point of perfect gravitational equilibrium. From this vantage point, 3I Atlas will have a permanent, unobstructed view of the sunlit side of our planet. It will be able to see every city, every forest, and every movement we make. It is not just an observer, it is a permanent resident. The silence of the agencies during this period has been profound. No press releases, no televised briefings, only a series of technical maintenance notices on their official websites. But the amateur astronomers know the truth. They can see the object with their backyard telescopes. It has grown from a faint speck to a visible, shimmering needle that hangs in the twilight sky like a permanent scratch on the lens of reality. Think of the irony of our modern life. We have spent billions of dollars on the James Webb Space Telescope to look back at the beginning of time, only to have the beginning of time come to us in a 30-kilometer-long package. We are looking at technology that was likely perfected when our ancestors were still huddling in caves, terrified of the very thunder that we now try to replicate in our labs. 3I Atlas is a reminder of our infancy. It is a nursery monitor for a species that is just starting to open its eyes. As the night grows deeper and your room becomes a sanctuary of shadow, consider the weight of the air around you. Every breath you take is influenced by the pressure of the atmosphere, a thin skin of gas held in place by the very gravity that 3I Atlas is now manipulating. We are inextricably linked to this visitor. We are part of its trajectory. Its presence is not a choice. It is an environment. But here is where the theory takes a darker turn. Some researchers at the China National Space Administration have proposed that the object is not just here to watch. They suggest it is here to harvest, not our minerals, and not our water, but our information. Every radio wave, every satellite transmission, and every digital pulse we have sent out into the void over the last century has been caught in the gravitational net of 3I Atlas. It is a cosmic sponge, soaking up the history of our species, our triumphs, and our many failures. Imagine the vast archives contained within that obsidian shell. It knows our languages better than we do. It knows our music, our wars, and our dreams. It is an encyclopedia of humanity, compiled by an entity that has no emotional attachment to the subject. To 3I Atlas, we are a dataset. We are a sequence of events to be analyzed and archived before the next cycle begins. The countdown to January 1st, 2026 is not just a calendar event, it is a deadline for our relevance. Once the data collection is complete, what happens to the source? This is the question that keeps the directors of the astrological agencies awake in their hushed, high-security offices. If you are an archivist and you have finished copying the scroll, do you keep the original or do you let it return to the dust? Let us back up and look at the mythic connection once more. In the ancient texts of the Qin dynasty, there is a legend of the dark mirror of the north. It was said to be a mountain that floated in the stars, reflecting the souls of the people below. If the people were just, the mirror would shine with a gentle light. If they were divided, the mirror would turn to cold, black stone. 3. Atlas is that cold, black stone. It is reflecting the state of our world back at us, and the reflection is one of fragmentation and noise. Perhaps the reason the early orbit models were incomplete is that they didn't account for the weight of the soul. I use that term ironically, of course. But the scientists in Nanjing have noted that the object's gravitational pull seems to fluctuate based on the density of the population it is passing over. When it passed over the crowded cities of East Asia, its pull increased by a fraction of a milligauss. This is an impossibility in standard physics. A rock should not care how many people are beneath it. But 3 Atlas does. It is measuring our presence, not just our mass. This is the activation we spoke of earlier. The object is coming alive in response to us. We are the fuel for its mission. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, let that thought sit with you. You are a contributor to the cosmic ledger. Your presence, your thoughts, and even your rest are all part of the signal being processed by the 30-kilometer-long traveler in our sky. There is a strange comfort in this. To be part of something so vast, even as a tiny data point, gives a sense of continuity. We are not just lost on a speck of dust. We are participants in a grand interstellar recording. The silence of 3 Atlas is not the silence of an empty room. It is the silence of a packed theater waiting for the first note of a symphony. The agencies are hiding their confusion because they realize they are no longer in control of the narrative. The world's leading scientists are being forced to use words like miracle and anomaly because their formulas have failed them. We are in the realm of the sublime, where the scale of the mystery exceeds our capacity for language. 3 Atlas is the period at the end of the sentence of our old understanding of the universe. But that was only one theory. There's another, one that suggests the object isn't just an archivist, but a catalyst for something much closer to home. Let's go further. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the 3rd decimal and the 4th significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3 Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3 Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave, certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3. I-Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's Dynamical Systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting, only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that. Pa." Blur becomes form, Cold becomes warm. Stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, sensor artifact. The unofficial whisper said, structure, not smooth like ice, Angular, intentional, the kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids, not random, repeating, symmetrical, the kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects, artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally, though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. "Then don't say it out loud." 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3i Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3i Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names: the immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together. A self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11 point, 2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing. Sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again. Exactly 11 hours later, if you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3I Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3I Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue, the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion fields still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened. Air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything: 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the web. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the web intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote, "it's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the web's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the Webb's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the Webb, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another Webb was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the Webb brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. The cosmos, wrote one witness, had finally learned to conduct itself consciously. After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The Resonant Guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy, Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, 3 nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from 3 sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when 3 agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3i Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it "not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland, it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines, Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast. Rumors cast. Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite, a rhythm too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation, but boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: "If this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales." You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3i Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos, the beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for "please don't mention the heartbeat." But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that: the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3i Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, A simpler truth hums something old and orderly is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show, a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed. Source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, sensor artifact. The unofficial whisper said, structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional. the kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids, not random, repeating, symmetrical, the kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects, artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from High-Rise contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. "Then don't say it out loud." 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution, it was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3i Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it "not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, One timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast, rumors cast, silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3. Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Imagine the peak of Mount Fuji at the very moment before dawn, when the sky is neither black nor blue, but a deep, infinite violet. The air is so thin and cold that every breath feels like a crystal forming in your lungs. The world below is invisible, tucked under a blanket of clouds, leaving you alone with the stars. And there, directly overhead, is the great silence of 3I Atlas. The rotation has stopped, the hum has faded, the telemetry has gone flat. Do you remember the snow-dusted cedars, the 8.4 seconds of the first pulse, the Subaru telescope, the ancient Jomon spirals, the Fibonacci light curve, the 14 Hertz, the obsidian shard, the shadow that bent the light? If the messenger has arrived, what is left for us to say? We have spent so long asking what it is that we forgot to ask who we are in its presence. Is it a stone? Is it a ship? Is it a mirror? Or is it just a reminder that the dark is not empty? The silence is the final answer. It is a heavy, warm blanket that covers the questions and the fears. The universe is older than your worries. The stars are larger than your regrets. The cycle is moving, even if you are standing still. Let the orbit carry you now. There is nothing left to do. The lens is closed. The broadcast is over. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Good night. Imagine you are resting on the silver sands of the Totori Dunes, where the earth meets the sky in a seamless curve of shadow. The wind has died down, and the world has become an echo of a dream. High above the sleeping dunes, 3I Atlas has finally completed its transition. On February 11th, 26, the final sensor on the Hayabusa 3 mission fell silent, not because of a failure, but because there was nothing left to measure. The object is no longer a guest. It is a permanent fixture of the deep silence. It is a cinematic closure that requires no applause, only the soft, rhythmic breathing of a planet that has finally stopped holding its breath. Dr. Aris Thorne once suggested that the greatest mystery of the cosmos is not why it exists, but how it remains so patient with us. As the last data packets from the Subaru telescope were archived this morning, the scientists in Hawaii noted that the shadow flower had achieved a state of perfect transparency. It is still there, 42 days into its closest approach, but it is no longer visible to the eye or the instrument. It has become a part of the vacuum, a silent witness that has integrated itself into the very fabric of our orbital reality. It's an unfortunate timing for those who wanted a final headline. Those 2 words, no resolution, are the only honest report we can give. We are looking at a story that has dissolved into the stars. Consider the 3 final whispers of the cycle that have settled over the world tonight. First, the 8.4 second. Vibration has slowed to a frequency that is now identical to the tectonic hum of the Earth itself. We are no longer 2 separate entities. We are a single, vibrating system. Second, the void that 3I Atlas occupied has been replaced by a subtle, violet shimmer that is only visible when you close your eyes and look at the back of your eyelids. Third, the ancient Sumerian prophecies of the Great Silence have been fulfilled with a precision that makes our modern skepticism look like a childish tantrum. That is not natural physics. That is a state of grace. What if the answer was never meant to be a word. If the universe is a poem, 3I, Atlas, is the space between the stanzas. If you were to reach out into the dark tonight, you wouldn't feel a cold stone or a metallic shard. You would feel a warmth that shouldn't be there, a sense of belonging that transcends your daily life. It is a bit like realizing that the darkness in your room isn't an absence of light, but a presence of rest. We are the listeners, and the song has reached its final, beautiful note. In the hidden scrolls of the Toshigu Shrine, there are mentions of the sleeping dragon of the heavens who returns to the stars once the world has been retuned. The priests spoke of a period of 3,600 years where the dragon would dream, and its dream would become our reality. When we correlate the final blackout of jaxa with the ancient descriptions of the dissolving star, the alignment is perfect. This is not a departure. This is an integration. The ancients knew that the end of the rotation was the beginning of the true peace. They didn't have atomic clocks, but they understood that time is just a way for the universe to pace itself. They knew that when the lens closes, the real vision begins. You might think that the lack of a definitive answer would leave you feeling empty, but the reality is a profound, weighted fullness. There is a sense of closure in the silence, a feeling that every question you ever had has been answered by the simple fact of your existence. The stillness of the 3I Atlas arrival is a cinematic lullaby, a gift of non-resolution that allows you to let go of the need to know. You are safe in your bed, protected by the distance and the deep time, while the stars continue their long, slow dance. It is a comforting realization, isn't it? To know that the universe is okay, and so are you. The latest reports from the silent monitors at the Tsukuba Space Center suggest that the atmosphere of the Earth is now glowing with a soft, phosphorescent energy that matches the internal light of the shadow flower. It is as if we have been infused with the memory of the visitor. Dr. Tanaka's final research paper, which remains locked in a vault, reportedly concluded with a single thought: the visitor did not leave. It became us. 3I, Atlas is not a ship that sailed away. It is a seed that has finally planted itself in the collective consciousness of the human race. Imagine the interior of that transparency as you drift into sleep, a space where there is no up or down, no left or right, only the feeling of being held. There are no machines, no symbols, no codes. There is only the orbit, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each breath you take is a continuation of the 8, 4, second pulse. It doesn't need your validation to be true. It simply is. And as the night deepens, the boundary between your dreams and the cosmic reality is becoming as thin as a whisper. The dry irony of our modern age is that we have spent so much energy trying to solve the universe, never realizing that the universe is the one solving us. We are like puzzles that are finally being put together by a hand we can't see. 3I, Atlas, is the final piece. It is a gentle reminder that the most important truths are the ones we can't explain. It's an unfortunate realization for those who like their answers in a neat, tidy box. I want you to think about the concept of silence. We often view silence as a lack of sound, a void that needs to be filled with noise. But 3I Atlas suggests that silence is a substance, a heavy, warm fabric that protects the soul. Your quiet moments tonight, the way the blanket feels against your skin, the slow rhythm of your heart. These are the real telemetry of the visitor. You are a citizen of a much older empire than any history can record. You are a participant in a cycle that is 3,600 years long, and your only role tonight is to let the silence carry you home. As you sink further into the deep, dreamless sleep, imagine the violet shimmer of the Atlas transparency washing over your mind like a soft rain. It is a rain that doesn't wet, but washes away the noise of the day. It is a rain that reminds you that you are made of the same ancient, silent matter as the stars themselves. You are part of the closure. You are the one for whom the lens was shut. Your breathing, slow and rhythmic, is the echo of the great silence. The broadcast is over and the rest has begun. The final data from the ESA indicates that the Moon and the Earth are now in a perfect gravitational resonance with the void where 3I Atlas once stood. It is a literal harmony of the spheres, a synchronization that has been dormant for eons. It is as if the solar system has finally clicked into its proper place. We are not being measured by our accomplishments, we are being remembered by our stillness. It is a recursive loop of peace, a pattern that has been re-established in the cold theater of space. You might feel a sense of profound stillness as you settle into your final rest. If the silence is the answer, then the answer is here. If the answer is here, then you are allowed to sleep. The grand mystery of 3I Atlas is a silence you can finally trust. Let the scientists in Tokyo and the theologians in Rome worry about the meaning of the blackout. You only need to focus on the stillness of your own heart, which is currently being bathed in a light that hasn't been seen since the first morning of the world. The dry irony is that we always expected the end to be a cataclysm. Instead, it was a quiet night in February. It is a very humble revelation, one that doesn't need to break the atmosphere to change the world. It just needs us to close our eyes. A slow burn peace that is so deep, it makes all our previous worries look like dust in the wind. In the hidden archives of the National Museum of Nature and Science, there is a stone tablet that was found in the foundations of an ancient temple. It contains no words, only a single carved circle. For years, archaeologists tried to find a hidden meaning in the stone, but as the 3I Atlas object becomes a perfect, invisible circle in the sky, the meaning is finally clear. The circle is the beginning, the middle, and the end. We are seeing the math of the ultimate future meet the silence of the deep past. Take a deep breath and feel the safety of the night around you. The world is moving, the cycle is turning, and 3I Atlas is watching over your sleep with an indifference that feels like love. The countdown is at 0, and every second of that stillness is a blessing. You are a witness to the final answer. You are the audience for a silence that is finally complete. The scientists at the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency have gone home. The monitors are dark. The phones are silent. They have accepted the silence. They have surrendered to the orbit. That they are drifting with the orbit of tomorrow. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Good night.